Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism and narcissistic relationships. Let's talk a little bit about the social climbing narcissist. Frankly, is there any other kind? Let's take a look. So, saying that the social climbing narcissist to me feels like a redundancy. All narcissistic people are social climbers. By definition, social status is a major motivator for them because it's conflated with all of that power, control, and domination stuff. But let's break down the different ways it can look because it can really cast a light on a very common theme in narcissistic relationships. Every narcissistic person, without exception, uses a relationship as some means to an end. It's not about the affiliation, the connection, or the love. It's about a means to an end. And that end is usually supply and social status. Status is a form of supply. Narcissistic folks are also chameleons who will tell stories and misrepresent themselves to get a seat at the table of people who have more social heft than them, more hip cred. In fact, if you are a fancy, shiny person, you have money or fame or high status or a fancy family, you are narcissism crack. You are what they want. And folks like you may be disproportionately preyed upon, interestingly, by narcissistic folks. In an intimate relationship, first of all, they may be social climbing. They may be using you as a tool of social climbing, right? It doesn't feel good to recognize that. But if, like I said, if you have money, resources, credentials, a family with influence or power or some notoriety or resources, whatever it is, if you represent a step up for a narcissistic person in terms of status, it could even be your appearance, then you may meet a narcissistic person and face one hell of a love bomb. The narcissistic person may do their homework ahead of time about you. We can do that quite easily now. Learn about you, what you're about, your place in the world. And yes, your social status will matter greatly in their pursuit of you. And while it doesn't feel good, remember, they aren't getting to know anyone they are in a relationship with, social status or no. Your social status is the quality they want to pursue. So it's not a you thing, it's how they pick people. This really plays out if the narcissistic person may not have a lot going for them, but they're very attractive, or they have some kind of hip cred, or they're just a really good liar and can sell a pretty fancy, compelling story about themselves. That's really not entirely true. Or you may just be a nice person who saw something that you liked about them because they're so good at selling a story, and then you get into a relationship with them. They are so manipulative that they may even play on how they really just wanted to get to know you as a person, and they see deeper than the superficial status stuff that other people must be trying to take advantage of. When a narcissistic person gets into a relationship with someone who will improve or lift their social status, your narcissistic supply becomes rocket fuel because it carries with it so much other stuff that they get for the price of just one relationship. But after a while, your relationship will go south in a terrible way. It always does, right? Because when the narcissistic person gets into a relationship with someone that they're using to social climb or to get an improvement in social status or even financial status, the narcissistic person is also, they're so insecure and they're constantly kind of on edge. So their shame is always right at the surface, right? Their rejection sensitivity, their hypersensitivity all around, it's right there. They overperceive every slight, every critique. They know at some level they're punching above their weight class, and they want to climb up in the ranks, and they want to be seen as the one with social status independent of you. In these types of social status climbing relationships, the narcissistic person may be in a rush to get a ring on it or get married, as that would imply a more concrete connection in a relationship, and that through marriage they would then have the status themselves. They will very quickly take on all the characteristics and identity of the status they are climbing to, spending money that they may not have, going into debt, or spending your money to get cars or clothes. They might start dressing in a certain way, just doing things associated with that higher social status. And this may not happen only within an intimate relationship. Narcissistic people are social climbers, plain and simple. They may seek out fancy friends. They may even endure humiliating treatment by those higher status friends just to be close to the action. They may try to social climb through their jobs, hang out at places, I guess the types of places where wealthy people congregate. That might be certain kinds of restaurants, clubs, resorts, private clubs. And they may attempt to get these expensive memberships to these private clubs repeatedly, anything to put them in proximity to lots of people with higher social status. They will talk about famous people they met one time, or rich people or high status people as though they are friends or business contacts. They will be assertive and even aggressive in courting business and social contacts. For example, their kid may go to school with the kid of a person they want to meet or do business with, and they'll try to use their own poor kid as a playdate pawn to get closer to the fancy parent. Trust you me, I grew up in LA and I saw that dance happen many, many times here. Within families, you may have also witnessed this. A narcissistic parent, for example, wanting higher social status, perhaps even being dismissive of your other parent who wasn't making that life happen for them, right? Couldn't keep up with the Joneses, the proverbial Joneses, or desperate to belong to whatever social groups existing, whatever those social groups were when you were a kid growing up, so they could move socially up. They may have been the parent. You might have had a parent that urged you to play with children whose families represented higher status in your community, even if you didn't like those children. Obviously, at work and in employment situations, this is a thing. And especially if your job is coalesced around sales and high-end, fancy kinds of clients. Because you need to get those folks near you, and the social climbing of being near fancy people so you can sell them stuff is a part of that. But the social climbing is not always a means to an end. It's not just to get the fancy lifestyle or close a sale. For a narcissistic person, it is the end. In the DSM, one of the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder is, quote, believes that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people or institutions. So social climbing in and of itself is the thing, and it reflects the grandiosity and entitlement and covetousness and power obsessive focus of all narcissistic personality styles. Their social climbingness can also explain the devaluation and the discard, especially if you were not the high status partner that helped them climb the ladder. They may have met you, and then, because they do tend to have a roving eye, they may, in the course of your relationship or marriage, meet or observe someone who has greater social status. And whether or not they leave you for them, they may do things like compare you to them, compare your lifestyle to theirs. And yes, at least in the status department, you're always going to come up short. The narcissistic person will be chronically dissatisfied in their life with you if they have this idea that there is somehow more out there and you aren't bringing it. Love, compassion, respect, that's not enough. The same thing can happen in family systems, where the narcissistic person may want to distance themselves from a family that may not have the high status they want. And this can be particularly pronounced if the narcissistic person managed to make it or succeed, really leapfrog away in terms, especially financially, from their family of origin. And they may want to distance themselves from the humble beginnings or a family that isn't so hip or sophisticated and are just regular folks. The social climbing narcissistic person may even, in some cases, try to make over their family, perhaps getting them into new clothes or cars or the like. Not always. Typically, they'll just distance from them. Even if that family and their support was what got that narcissistic person to that place, their lack of empathy means they don't care. If the narcissistic person in a relationship with you manages to score a new high-status person, yes, there is a good chance that they will leave you for them. Always remember, for narcissistic people, relationships are superficial and exist for their regulation and for their needs. So someone coming in with the mother lode of the ultimate supply is very enticing and impossible for them to turn down. I cannot tell you, in the years I've been doing this in practice, how many times I've seen this happen. Because the narcissistic person is like a damned fishing trawler, they have hundreds of lines in the water, always looking around to see who the biggest fish in the room is. So when that person who can climb them up the ladder does start to bite, and they can sort of snivel their way into there, they will. And it feels awful if this happens to you. When this happens, and keep in mind, social status may be more than just money or family status or something. It may just be that they want the status of someone younger and the social climb that comes from spinning around town with their shiny new thing. If this happens to you when you are left for the social climb trade out, it's an awful feeling. And many people will say this particular dynamic multiplied this grief, and it takes a minute and feels deeply unjust, especially as you witness the narcissistic person roll into a new life, which of course they have to broadcast on Instagram, because really, for a narcissistic person, what's the point of social status if you can't make people envy you, which is another diagnostic criterion for narcissistic personality disorder, by the way. Narcissistic friends will do this too. They may blow you off, claim to be sick, and then you see the Instagram post of them at some high-status event with other people. Narcissistic people don't always have the best frontal lobes, so they just have to post, even though they know you might see it after they lied to you. And they also lack empathy, so they wouldn't ever stop to think about how it would affect you, and they just assume you'll come back around. Because friendships aren't monogamous, narcissistic friends can pursue their social climbing in a different way and may claim they have to do it for their career, for networking, or whatever. But if the social climbing ladder friends engage with them, you will always be the B list, the backup plan, if the high status new friends aren't available. So what does that mean for us? You gotta always remember that any relationship with a narcissistic person was never and could never be deep. This confirms it. And I promise you this, they may come sniffing around and hoovering again if the rungs of the social climbing ladder break and they come crashing back down. Social climbing and social status are the same in terms of function as entitlement and grandiosity and arrogance and charm and charisma and all of the narcissistic defenses that protect a narcissistic person from internal insecurity and shame. And with the social climbing comes the contempt and snobbiness and a sort of looking down at you if they perceive you as someone who really can't help with their social status. The narcissistic person has a well-honed ability to scan a room and figure out who is worth it for them so they can go grab up supply and status, and they make a beeline to them. They are also masterful at talking to a person and pretty quickly figuring out if that person they're talking to can do anything for them, and if they can't, again, quite quickly move on to their next target. But if you are on the receiving end of this kind of discard, it hurts. And as much as I say, it's not you, it's them, it doesn't take away the sting of feeling that you weren't enough. But enough what? For the narcissistic person, it may be about whether the new person's family has money, or they can go on some fancy-ass vacation, or they have social standing, or they have connections, or a beach house, or can make them help them make something happen, like finance their business. Or are simply young. The new partner's simply young, and they can seem more virile or interesting by having a disproportionately young and attractive partner on their arm. These are superficial indicators, but it hurts nonetheless. And my holiday prayer for each and every one of you that has been through this kind of experience is that you get to see their social climbing experiment fall apart. May we all get to witness that. I gotta say, I got that once when a particularly mean lady who had clearly social climbed, as the story I was told goes. I didn't know, but that's what I was told about her. And who, because I was sort of the kind of dumpy, overweight mom, kind of looked at me like sort of smelly laundry and wouldn't give me the time of day when she first met me. In fact, I think she probably thought I was one of the servers at the event that I first met her at and not an attendee. Many, many years later, she reached out wanting help when her narcissistic husband, big surprise, left her for the much younger replacement set. She reached out wanting therapy. She said, "Oh, I remember you knew me way back when." I had already closed up my practice by then, so I was able to politely demur and say, "I'm sorry, I don't take new clients." I have empathy, so I did feel bad for her. I felt schadenfreude, of course, but I felt bad for her. But she was a cautionary tale of the dangers of social climbing. Get too high, and the thud when you land is a lot more painful. And I had enough pride to say, yeah, no, thanks. Always remember how the mighty fall. And there's a lot more oxygen here down at sea level anyhow. Let those narcissistic people keep reaching for their castles in the sky. It gets them out of our lives and frees us up for healthier and more authentic relationships with healthier and more authentic people who like to keep their feet firmly planted on the ground. And speaking of the It's Not You, really it's a book, It's Not You. Please check it out. Link is in the notes. Check it out and hopefully you want to pre-order it. Thanks again.